This conference will now be recorded.
Hi everybody, it's Dr. Ide. I'm just going to do another example as promised from our economics chapter 5 cost chapter. So I know that a few of us were a little bit worried about how we were going to do this or how this is exactly going to work. And really, I think that your trepidation is just because you're looking at these numbers and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to have to do math and it's going to mess me up because I'm really not that good with math or whatever the case may be. So I want you to take that fear and put it off to the side. And what you're doing is you're paying attention and you're making it make sense to you. Because the truth of the matter is you deal with economics every single day. You run your households, you pay for things, you live somewhere, right? So obviously you're not that bad with economics and money and things of that nature, right? Budgeting, figuring out how much things cost, how much you should be paying for something, etc. So you can do this, and here we go. I already have our PowerPoint pulled up and I have it on a second screen. So if I'm looking back and forth, that's what I'm doing here, going back to your PowerPoint. So last evening, we looked at our first example, which is your hip replacement. And let me squeeze this over. Okay, and I'm pulling up these little notes just so you guys are more able to see everything. I added those notes in down there. Okay, so you run a service that provides 200 hip replacements per year. All right, the variable costs average 12,000 per case. Right? So the first thing you know that you're going to have to do, and we did this last night. So this is what we did last night. Let me make that much smaller because I'm not going to be able to fit anything in there. Okay, so 12,000. Right, times 200. You know you're going to have to do that in order to get the total price on that because each case costs you $12,000 in variable costs. So if we already know we have to do it, why not just do it, right? So 12,000, and here's my calculator. Let me just pull this over here so you guys can see it. So 12,000 times 200 equals $2,400,000. Gosh, right? That's a lot of money. Okay. So $2,400,000, and that's your total variable costs, right? That's a lot of money. Okay. Your overhead costs are $2 million. And again, your overhead costs can include anything like utilities, rent, like whatever it is. Those are your overhead costs. I'm going to put etc. So we know that's not an exhaustive list. Okay. Your average price is $30,000. So for each one of these hip replacements, you get $30,000. So the question last evening was, what's our average cost? I'm going to bold this. And are we profitable? And I'm sure you remember this answer from last night, but I'm going over it again just so you have a video of it and you can go back to it anytime you need it. So here's what we're doing. So first thing we had to do was figure out our total cost because like I said on this slide, you had a variable cost, which was $12,000 per case. You had 200 cases. So the first thing we did was figure out what our total variable costs were. So we took the 12,000 per case and we times it by 200, right? Because it was $12,000 per hip replacement. So there was 200 hip replacements done in the year. So it was $12,000 for each one of those in variable costs. So that equaled $2,400,000, right? And here it is right here. Is your 12,000 times 200, right? And I'm just gonna paste what we had in there. Oops, it pasted very large. Okay, so the 2,400,000 was your total variable cost. So I'm gonna break this down even further like I did last night because I don't like when we don't break it down. And then you're going, where did that number come from? And they do this opposite. So they put the total costs up here instead of like showing it to you first, which I hate. Okay. So how did we get that? So this $2 million, again, we ask ourselves, what was the $2 million? The $2 million was overhead, right, which is a cost. So $2 million in overhead plus the variable cost, which was 12,000 per case and 200 cases. So again, what did we have to do? We had to take the $12,000 and times it by 200 to get 2,400,000 because that's your total variable cost. So we took the 2 million in the overhead, which we know we have, overhead costs, right? And we added to it the 2,400,000 in total variable costs, right? And what did that equal? That equaled the 4,400,000. Okay? So really, really simple, not really bad at all. And let me just do it on my calculator here for you. So 2,400,000 plus another 2 million equals 4,400,000. Okay, great. All right, so that wasn't too bad, right? So then we were looking at the average cost. All right, and again, this was backwards. I'm gonna delete that. So how do you get the average cost? You take the total cost, which we know is 4,400,000, which is right here. I'm gonna put, total costs. And total cost equaled your overhead plus total variable. Variable costs, right? Okay. Let me make this a little bit smaller so I can fit things in. Okay. So your average cost is your total costs divided by your cases. Your total costs were $4,400,000 and the amount of cases were 200. We know that because we were given that number. So you take 4,400,000, and I'm going to do it over here, 4,400,000, and you just simply divide that by 200, and we get 22,000. So our average cost per hip replacement is $22,000. So we're charging $30,000 for the hip replacement, right? And this is what matters here. So let's go to our next slide. So we're charging $30,000. Let's hold up on that real quick. We're charging $30,000, right? So people may say, well, look, they're making $30,000 on this hip replacement. That's ridiculously expensive, right? Well, it looks like that. But once you take out our costs, it's lower than that. Of course, not like much lower, but 22,000, right? So that $8,000 is going towards, in each one of these cases is going towards our costs. Okay. So the question was, are you profitable? So in order to figure out if we were profitable, we have to figure out what our total revenue is, right? So in order to do that, and I'm going to break this down even further again, you're going to take the cost of one, of course, hip replacement, which was $30,000, and you're going to times that by the 200 cases that we did in a year. So, and again, easy calculator stuff here. You just pop up your calculator and you go 30,000, right? Let me put this over here so I hide that final number. 30,000 times 200 equals $6 million. So you're like, wow, $6 million, right? That looks like our total revenue, right? That looks like our total revenue. But is it really our total revenue? Oh, I did that down there. Okay. And this was cases, just so we remember what everything was. Reduce it a little bit more. Should do it. So total revenue, and I really don't like when they do this because that makes it look like that was, okay. So total revenue is the cost of one hip replacement, right, which is $30,000, times the amount of hip replacements we did in the year, which was 200. We did 200 hip replacements. It's a lot of hips getting replaced. It was $30,000 for each one. So $30,000 times 200 equals $6 million. So hey, when you first look at that, you're thinking, hey, that looks like a lot of money, huh? All right, but we have to remember that we had a lot of costs, right? Our total costs were $4,400,000. That included the $2 million worth of overhead, plus the $2,400,000 that was variable costs, right? That was our total variable costs. So the $2 million was overhead, and the $2,400,000 was variable costs. I'm doing this so you remember, you know, where these numbers came from, even though we just went over them, and we could always go back a slide, but it's just easier. So our total revenue, and I'm going to move this too. Okay, so our total revenue was $6 million, but our total costs were $4,400,000. So what does that mean to us? What does that mean to us? Well, the answer is simple. Well, the question is, are we making a profit? And the answer is what? Yeah, we're making a profit because we are taking in $6 million, right? And we're spending $4,400,000. That's a difference of $1.6 million. So we're making $1.6 million off of the hip replacements. We're making $1.6 million. Look at it this way. Let's say that you sold facial masks in COVID, right? And you made them yourself. A lot of people did this. And say that you were selling them all year, and you made your total revenue, right, was, I don't know, $10,000. That's a lot, right? But let's say your total costs was $6,000, right? So you made in revenue $10,000, right? But your cost to make these facial masks was $4,000. So if your revenue was $10,000 and your cost was $4,000, were you profitable? Did you make money? And the answer would be yeah, right? Your revenue was 10, your costs were 4, 10 minus 4 equals $6,000 in profit. Not bad, right? If you don't know how to do this, and of course I skipped, you know, how many masks you sold and all those details because I'm just making it up as I go along. But when you look at the final numbers, the revenue and the cost, as long as your revenue is higher than your costs, you're going to be profitable. All right, let's look at another example. So in the next example, or in the next portion of, you know, the PowerPoint, it's not really a whole different example. It's the same example, but we're just expanding upon it. So this goes over reference pricing. And down at the bottom here, I added a separate little note, which isn't on your original PowerPoint. So if you want to go back and add this in. So your reference pricing is a maximum that an insurer will pay for a product. Patients typically must pay the difference between the product's price and the reference price. You could kind of think of this as, you know, balanced billing. Now, I don't know if you guys remember balanced billing, but I will help you out here. So when you have managed care plans, like a PPO, you know, an HMO, you might have a discounted fee for service. Okay, what does that mean? It means that you go to a doctor and the doctor says, hey, I want $100 for this service. It doesn't matter what service it is. It could be toenail clipping. And then they do actually charge $100 for that, by the way. When doctors go into nursing homes to like clip toenails and things, it's like $100 per person, per toenail clipping, not per toe, but per person. So they get $100 to clip toenails. Which, yeah, I can almost see that because that would be an interesting job. Anyway, don't let me get off track. So let's say that the physician, you know, is a part of a managed care plan. They're contracted. You know, there's a contract there. So the service would typically be $100, right? Typically, that would be their usual fee. But let's say that because they are doing a discounted fee for service, because they contract it with an insurer, let's say it's Blue Cross and Blue Shield, they agreed to get paid $80 to clip the toenails instead of $100. So if balanced billing is allowed, that $20 would be pushed off to the patient would have to pay it. If balanced billing is not allowed, then they just have to write it off. They just don't get that amount because they contracted with the insurer to receive $80 as paid in full. Okay, so if it was a $100 service and they contracted with the insurer to get $80 for that service, then that's all they're getting. If they do not allow balanced billing. If they do allow balanced billing, then they're able to go to the patient to get the rest of it. So why does that matter? Okay, well, when you're talking about reference pricing in this situation is kind of working the same way. So Blue Cross pays $22,000 per hip. The negotiated price is $30,000. So Blue Cross is only going to pay 22 grand per hip. That's it. That's all they're paying. They're not paying anymore. But the physician or the hospital system or whatever you want to call it, they charge $30,000 per hip. Well, 30,000 minus 22,000, and this is really just for a visual here, because you guys could do quick math in your head, but 30,000 minus 22,000 leaves us with $8,000 left over. Who's going to pay the $8,000? The patient. If they allow balanced billing, that would go off, that would be put on the patient's bill. All right. So patients now pay $8,000, and it's just the difference between what the facility wants and what the insurance company will actually pay them. And then it says our volume has dropped to 110. 110 meaning instead of 200 cases, now we have 110 cases. Okay, that's all that means, volume. You know, and really we can call it patients, right? So instead of doing 200 hips in the year, now we're just going to do 110 hips in the year. All right. And I think once you break it down this way, it makes it much easier because we have a tendency of looking at things and thinking, oh my gosh, this is so difficult. What do they mean by volume? What do they mean by this? What do they mean by that? And I think it's just a lot of fancy way to say very simple things, right? And now, if you said the patient volume has fallen to 110, that might have been much easier for us. Oh, okay. Well, that's less patients, right? We could get that part. So when you're looking at stuff like this, make sure you're asking yourself, what do they mean by that? And I promise you 95% of the time, you're going to be like, oh, they just mean, you know, how many patients, how many hips they're going to do that year. Okay, so your variable costs are remaining at 12,000, right? That hasn't changed. Your overhead are 2 million, that hasn't changed. The average price is 30,000, that hasn't changed. And we're going to look at our average cost, and we're going to ask the question, are we profitable again? Don't forget, the average cost is the total cost divided by the output. All right, so now we're doing 12,000 times 110. Oops, let me bring over my calculator here. So 12,000 times 110 is 1,320,000. So 12,000 times 110 equals 1,320,000 in total variable costs. Okay, so $1,320,000 plus $2 million is going to be $3,320,000 in total costs. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's go to the next slide. So your total costs again are $3,320,000. I guess I wasn't getting that much ahead of myself. And how did we get that? Here's what we did. We took our total variable costs, right, which was $1,320,000, and we added our overhead, which was $2 million. I'm always afraid I'm not going to put as many zeros. Okay. All right. And that, of course, equaled $3,320,000. Okay. Okie doke. So in order to do average cost, again, you have to take what? You have to ask yourself the question, how are we going to do this? And I hate when they put this backwards, and they keep doing it to me. I don't like that. Okay, so your average cost is your total cost, which your total costs equal your total variable costs plus your overhead, right? So your total cost, which is your total variable cost plus your overhead, equals $3,320,000. You're going to divide that divide it by the number of cases, okay, which is 110. Remember, our volume fell. All right, so let's do that just for fun and kicks here. So $3,320,000 divided by 110, which is our amount of cases, our volume, because it fell, equals 30,181.81 repeating. So here's how we got 30,182, and I'm sure you all remember this, but just for, you know, our fun-filled Wednesday. If it ends, or if it begins, excuse me, after your decimal point with anything that's a 5 or higher, so this is an 8, you're going to round up, right? So that's how we got 3,182, because this is an 8, so that goes to a 2. Okay? I'm sure you guys remember all that fun stuff. So let's answer our question. If our total costs are $3,320,000 and our total revenue is $3,300,000, are we profitable? Oh, and we already know that we're not, because we see the dread red. Remember, I say you always want to be in the black, you don't want to be in the red. So if your revenue was $3,300,000, but your cost was $3,320,000, you're losing money, you're negative $20,000. This is what happens when your volume falls. So some of you are going to say, okay, well, what happened with COVID then? Because weren't a lot of people like not getting their testing done, and they were afraid to go to the hospital and stuff, the doctor? The answer is yes, it was a disaster. And I think that a lot of folks, you know, when the pandemic began, thought that, you know, the hospitals were going to be filled with people and everybody was going to need a respirator and all these things were going to happen. And I think that it probably scared most people so much that they didn't want to go to even get their routine testing done. Women didn't go to get mammograms done. You know, men didn't go for their prostate checks. And, you know, it's kind of those things where if you really didn't want to go anyway, it was a good reason not to go. So what happens if, you know, you are an organization or a hospital system or a facility and you have a patient volume drop, even one that goes from 200 to 110? You could see it here. It's a disaster. It's a disaster. So what are your choices after that? You know, and you guys are pretty smart, you know, when it comes to what to do. Well, there's a couple things you could do, right? You can raise the price, you know, so you get more money out of fewer people, but then of course you're going to have a competition problem because other people are going to be cheaper than you. Or you can find a way to lower your costs, which is something that we're looking, to do. So your book in chapter 5 focuses on controlling your costs, because that's really what we're trying to get a handle on in healthcare. So, you know, managers need to find out what our costs are, and we need to know how to reduce them. And, you know, then we need to look at how the cost and quality are being affected. So least costly ways of producing desired products and increase health. You know, ways to reduce costs, we can increase efficiency. And sometimes increased efficiency means things like shorter wait times, you know, so you can get more people in during that time frame. I don't know how many times you guys have called the doctor and said, I'm dying today, right? I'm so sick, I'm dying. I need to come see you. And the doctor said, well, or the, you know, a medical administrative assistant, you know, or the nurse in the office, you know, she's typing and she's looking things up and you hear clicking and typing. And then she comes back on the phone and she says, well, I could take you next Wednesday. You're like, but I'm dying today. I could be dead by next Wednesday, right? You're like, that's not very efficient. Shouldn't you block off times for people who really need to come in and see you because we're dying, we're so sick? Oh, well, all those appointments are taken, you know, stuff like that. So we can increase efficiency for sure, and that will reduce costs. And we can, you know, cut product lines that aren't working. You know, if something isn't giving us a whole lot of return on investment, you know, we probably shouldn't keep doing it. You know, but costs are complex for a lot of reasons. And again, cost depends on the perspective, right? It depends on the perspective. So, you could be talking to someone and they could say, well, I paid $4,000 and I don't really feel like that was a whole lot of money, right? I just don't feel like that was a whole lot of money. Good for you, because I could have paid $4,000 and thought that that was a fortune, right? So it's one of those things. This slide talks about opportunity costs. And I just want to go ahead and make sure I'm able to give you this definition here of what opportunity cost is. It's the value of what one cannot do as a result of making a choice. Cannot do, right? So it's costing you can't do something now, right? And what is fixed depends on the time frame, like fixed costs. Okay, without insurance, cost perspectives matter a little. Insurance tends to complicate things, of course. There's accounting costs, and then there's economic costs. So accounting costs are objective, they're verifiable, they reflect historic costs, they serve lenders and investors, things like that. And then our economic costs serve managers, and they reflect these opportunity costs, what we cannot do because of that cost. So right here, it's just showing you a good example. So here's accounting costs and here's economic costs. So your revenue is equal in both of these examples. Your labor is worth $100, your supplies are worth $250, your rent, right, which is your overhead, is $200. Cost of owner's time. If you're looking at it from an accounting cost perspective, it's $0. If you're looking at it from an economic cost perspective, it would be $100. Okay, so when you're looking at this, the profit is 50 in both, right? So what does that mean? Opportunity cost equals the value of a resource in its next best use. So opportunity costs are typically easy to measure, right? But what is the opportunity cost of an hour of nursing time, an hour of salaried employees' time, obsolete equipment, a vacant hospital wing, right? So the question is, when we're looking at and thinking about opportunity costs, right? What is that actual cost? And I did have, let me see. I did have an extra resource here I was going to pull up, and I accidentally X'd it out, of course. Let's see if I can pull it back up here. It should be, here we go. Here we go. Okay, I'm just going to pull it over because I'm sharing that screen. Here we go. Oop. There it is. Now, some of you may say, and I do get this. Can I use, if I don't understand something, can I use Investopedia? And I do put this as a resource for you guys sometimes because it's very easily broken down, right? And like I said, in your textbook, a lot of these things are said very complexly. They're very smart people wrote the book and they want to show that they're very smart and etc. I like to be able to read something and say, oh, okay, that's easy, right? I like to break it down and just make it very easy language. We don't want jargon, right? Well, you don't want to go to a doctor that uses all of the medical terms and you leave going, I have no idea what they just said, right? Same thing happens in economics and in mathematics. People kind of make things harder than they are when, there's an easier way to say it. So opportunity costs represent the potential benefits an individual investor or business misses out on when you choose one alternative over another, right? So the idea of opportunity costs comes up in healthcare economics the same way it would in any other business economics. So because the definition, because by definition they're unseen, like you can't see opportunity costs, so you chose an alternative and you didn't realize what you were going to miss out on. It's like, you say to yourself, do I want to go to the Virginia Zoo today or do I want to go to Busch Gardens today? Oh, I'm thinking, I'm going to go, well, I haven't been to the zoo in a while, but Busch Gardens is always fun, but we go there all the time. I'm going to go to the zoo, right? So the next day, you had a great time at the zoo. It was all good. It was all fun. But the next day you go on social media and you find out that Busch Gardens had, and I don't really know who's popular today, but a really popular band or artist playing, and you love them. They're your favorite. In this world, they're your favorite. And in addition to that, they had like a food and wine festival going on or something really, really fun. And you're saying to yourself, if I had known, right, that they were there, I would have gone to Busch Gardens instead of the zoo, but I didn't know. Same thing happens when you're looking at business, right? So you picked an alternative and you did not know what you were going to be missing out on. It happens all the time. Think about it like that. That's an opportunity cost. All right, think about it like that. Okay. All right, so let's see. Let me get rid of this. All right. Okay. All right, guys, and that was all of the examples that I wanted to go over with you. I wanted to continue through from chapter 5. I did have one more, I think from chapter 4. Let's see. Nope, I think that was good. That was what I wanted to go over with you. And if I do post more examples, I'll post them in separate videos because I feel like this one's getting a little bit long. All right, guys, if you have any questions, please let me know as always, but I hope you enjoy this. And I'm probably going to put it on YouTube and then give you all the link so you can go ahead and come back to it anytime you like. All right, have a great day, guys. Thanks so much.